give us the cue. And action. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the City Council Committee on Finance, Thursday, September 10th, 2020. I'm going to call this meeting to order, but I also would ask the committee members and members of the public and also council members, tomorrow will be a solemn anniversary in this country. I ask everybody to take a moment of reflection of the lives that we lost on 9/11. Me personally, I remember that day just like it was yesterday, and what an horrific event it was for the entire nation, and of course the men and women who lost their loved ones in the Twin Towers, and the first responders who were lost in the Twin Towers, and then of course the subsequent loss of life dealing with that threat to this great country that we call America. So that's where we just take a moment of reflection first. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Thank you. Also, another quick little, some more news. We also have a new addition to the City Council, City Clerk's family. City Clerk, his wife, has gave birth to a beautiful baby boy, and we want to wish Mr. Clerk and his wife best wishes from the committee, and of course from me and my constituents. He was with us the entire pandemic, and of course now he's with his loving family, and we want to wish him luck, congratulations, and congratulations to his wife, of course, and to have a healthy and happy baby in life. So, Madam Clerk, can we take a roll call vote and call the meeting to order and roll call vote, please?
Chairman Cleosi.
Present.
Vice Chairwoman Ryan.
Present.
Councilwoman Castillo.
Present.
Councilman Anthony.
Present.
And Councilman Taylor.
Here.
As Vice President, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Thank you all. Let the record reflect that President Matos is present. President Pro Tem Correa is present. The Chief of Staff is present. I believe, I'm looking for, also the City Solicitor is present, Kenny Chiaverini, at this time. And then before we go any further, also let the record reflect that Doris De Los Santos is present too. Okay. And Billy Kepner is with us too, wishing him well, and of course, our wishes to him and his family, of course. Quickly for the committee, let's do some housekeeping measures on the agenda, some items that we need to continue right away, then we can get into the meat of the agenda. So, okay? So, first I'd like to entertain a motion at this time to continue 1, 2, 3, all the way to 17 and to the next finance meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk, you have the motion by the Majority Leader and second by Councilman Castillo and Councilman Anthony. Discussion, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you. Next, motion to continue item number 22.
So moved.
To the next finance meeting.
Second.
Second by Councilman Taylor. Discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So, Madam Clerk, why don't we take it from the new top, which I believe is item number 18, and in that process.
Resolution authorizing approval of the following contract award by the Board of Contract and Supply in accordance with Section 21-26, of the Code of Ordinances, American Alarm.
Okay, great. Do we know who is to talk on this matter?
I am, sir.
Oh, Mr. Bucco, thank you. So, Mr. Bucco, so what we'll do is this. I believe Mr. Prada is going to be speaking this evening, Mr. Mancini is going to be speaking this evening, and Sarah Severa is probably going to be speaking. I think at this time. Oh, let the record reflect that also, by the way, the internal auditor is present, Gina Costa. Can we have Mr. Bucco, Mr. Prada, Mr. Mancini, and Ms. Severa get sworn in, Madam Clerk?
Please raise your right hand. You swear on the self being perjured, that the testimony they're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You.
Lawrence
Mr.
Mancini, Chief Financial Officer, City of Providence.
Al Bucco, Manager of Facilities, Public Property.
Leo Parada, Director of Public Works.
And
Sarah's muted.
Sarah, identify yourself.
Sorry, Sarah Silveria, Finance Director.
Thank you. Also, thank you all for joining. Also reflect that a treasurer and special senior advisor to the High Cabinet Council is Jimmy Lombardi. Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Bucco, can you tell us what this request is about? What is it? Clear it's an American Alarms. Is it what kind of contract is it? Is it a continuation, an extension, a new contract? Can you give us a little background on it, please, sir?
Sure, Chairman. This is a legacy agreement for American Alarms. It's basically for monitoring services, monthly monitoring services, and we've engaged to encumber the amount for the entire year rather than the way we were doing in the past and paying it monthly. So this is.
So this number will represent the entire year, so we could just, and then you'll pay it accordingly. Is that correct, Mr. Bucco?
For 11 locations, and we will pay them monthly out of the encumbrance.
Great, thank you. And this also includes City Hall?
No, sir, it does not. That is not with American Alarms.
Is City Hall with a different alarm service?
Yes, it is, sir.
Okay, but it does have an alarm service, right?
It is, sir.
Okay, great, all right. Comments, questions by committee members?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
No,
Mr.
Council member? Internal Auditor, Treasurer, any issues? With that, then can I have a motion to recommend approval on item number 18?
Motion to recommend approval of item number 18.
Second.
Vice Chair, second by Councilman Taylor. Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, item number 19, please.
Resolution purchase approval of the following contract awarded by the Board of Contract and Supply in accordance with section 21-26, D2 of the Code of Ordinances, with code machinery.
Okay, great. So I believe would that be Mr. Parada on this one?
Correct.
Mr. Parada, can you just tell us, can you tell us what this is for? And then I would also ask a side question is, Mr. Mancini, would this be something that should be put in the master lease? Like, is this be something we should eventually purchase? So first I'd like to know what it's about, Mr. Parada, and what are we buying and what is it for? And then you can then ask the next question, okay? Mr. Parada?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is our front end loader. This is the only one we currently have. And as you made the comment, it is in our master lease agreement to buy a new one that's pending, so that we will be getting another vehicle shortly, hopefully. But this is to make repairs to the front end loader that we currently have. Right now, it's only functional in short distances. We can't take it out on the road, so we're able to use it in the lower yard. It's a critical piece of equipment that we use during the wintertime for loading salt. We use it for cleaning lanes. We use it when we have an issue with major dumpings on streets. We use it in concert with our hurricane barriers. So it's a critical piece of equipment. It's the only major front end loader that the city has citywide. The repairs would be done by Woodco. They are a licensed Volvo dealer, and that's what this piece of equipment is. Then technically not a sole source because there is another Volvo dealer, but they're in Long Meadow, Massachusetts, which is just south of Springfield. Woodco is located in Woburn, Mass, and they also have an office in Johnston, Rhode Island. So it makes it convenient for us for having the repairs done there.
Mr. Parada. And Mr. Mancini, we do have a new front-end loader to be purchased for the DPW department.
That's
and
correct.
when's the ETA for them to receive that new product?
Mr. Chairman, I will defer to Mr. Parada. I don't know what the lead time is to order it, and if it, in fact, has already been placed before the Board of Contract was supplied. Mr. Parada?
Yes, we did put something before the board. I think the pricing came in a little bit higher than what was anticipated, so I think we're just waiting for that to be put back before the board once again. Lead time, there's not a lot of lead time. I think the dealer that we had gotten the bid from, the quote from, had indicated that we would be able to get the loader relatively quickly. And it's our plan to be able to use both, one as a spare and using it during the winter times to load salt, and the other to possibly use it at an ancillary site and also to work outside the confines of DPW. So this will give us a great deal of flexibility.
Thank you, Mr. Parada. Internal Audit, did you have a question? You're muted, Internal Auditor. So either,
Yes,
Gina,
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
do you have a question?
Not a question, just a comment. A lot of letters have been coming through the Board of Contract and Supply. This invoice is from June. It should have been, if it was an emergency, although it was not stated, it should have been at least informally bid by the purchasing department. And I don't know that that was done. I understand that they are the only local vendor, but still none of that information is on the letter for us to know ahead of time. That's all I have.
All right, so that's probably a housekeeping measure. I would just ask the directors, maybe to be aware of that. Probably we can address some of these issues beforehand, so this way maybe you can avoid some of the processes. So it's just something to think about. So with that said, I don't believe there's any other questions at this time. Looks like we've got a front-end loader right now. It's going to get repaired. We got a new one we ordered, and it's going to get a new one through the master lease. I know the council approved. I remember doing that. And any comments or questions by committee members?
No, Mr. Chair.
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. With that, do we have a motion to recommend approval?
Motion to recommend approval.
By Deb. Second. A second by Councilman Anthony, Councilman Taylor. Discussion, all in favor? Aye. Thank you, Mr. Parada. Next item, Madam Clerk, item number 20, please.
Resolution authorizing approval of the following contracts awarded by the Board of Contract and Supply in accordance with Section 21-26, E2 of the ordinance. West Elmwood Housing Development Corporation.
Thank you. And Health and Communities, this must be Ellen Sinar, right? So Ellen Sinar, Madam Clerk, could you please swear Ms. Sinar in, and then we can go from there.
Please raise your right hand. You swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and where you're from, please.
Ellen Steinar, Director of the Healthy Communities Office.
Thank you.
And apologies for my small associates in the background.
Welcome, Ms. Sinar. Can you just tell us, what this is about? I cleared from your office, and what's the purpose of the money, and what will it be used for, et cetera?
Sure. So throughout the COVID pandemic, the Healthy Communities Office has been leading a significant amount of the city's food distribution work. A big gap in our food distribution work has been two pieces. One, culturally appropriate foods for residents, especially those who are newly arrived to the United States. And the second is the availability of fresh produce. So a lot of the donations or food distributions we've had throughout COVID have been for non-perishable foods. So not sort of fresh produce, dairy, and things like that. And so with this funding, we were requesting the ability for West Elmwood Housing Development Corporation's Sankofa initiative to support growers and growing culturally appropriate foods to be able to meet that food insecurity need for families who are sort of in the West End 02907 health equity zone and would be grown by local farmers and supporting the local urban agriculture industry. The request was made directly for West Elmwood and their Sankofa initiative because they do work with hyperlocal farmers and have a really strong capacity to grow vegetables and other types of food products that meet a need for West African and Southeast Asian residents.
Okay, great. Any questions by committee members? Council members? Mr. Tenolo, do you have any questions? And just very quickly, did you say culturally appropriate? I don't know, what do you mean culturally appropriate food? I don't, what does that mean?
Yeah,
I mean, I
so
think I know what it means, could you just enlighten me? I just want to make sure I understand that. So these new kind of terms, I'm just trying to understand it.
Yep. So every culture has dietary preferences. Italians like certain foods. Folks from West Africa might like other food. If you have toddlers, they have their own culture of food that they like and particularly like to throw on the floor. So it's really thinking about dietary preference for people. Not everyone likes the same type of food. So making sure, especially for fruits and vegetables that are high in nutrients, that residents are able to get quality produce that they like to eat.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? With that, do we have a motion to recommend approval item number 20?
Motion to recommend approval of item number 20.
Second.
By Vice Chair and Deputy Majority Leader, second by Councilman Anthony and Taylor. Discussion, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you. Next, item number 21, we also have healthy, I guess Mr. Nas again, right? Item number 21, Madam Clerk?
Resolution authorizing approval of the following contract award by the Board of Contract and Supply in accordance with Section 21-26B of the Code of Ordinances, dated 4.
Mr. Nas, before you speak, the food product, will we be able to get reimbursed through COVID-19 money on that too? Can we use some of that?
Yeah, so we would be able to use it as part of our city's 25% match.
Oh, great. That's fantastic. And what about this item? Can we do that also? Will this be utilized?
I wish this next item is actually already a federally funded opportunity. So
That's fine.
yeah, so a few months ago, the Healthy Communities Office was awarded a $1.5 million grant through SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Association, which is a subsidiary of a federal agency. This grant is focused on supporting alcohol and tobacco/nicotine prevention for youth ages 12 to 17 in out-of-school time settings. The grant requires really significant epidemiological and evaluation services that our office does not have the capacity to do, but that we on a regular basis hire out for from outside agencies. And so in the grant application, we identified an organization called DataCore, and we have a long history. The Healthy Communities Office has a long history of working with DataCore on our monitoring and evaluation work. They currently evaluate a grant that we have related to substance use disorders. And so part of the award is based on your qualifications and meeting the ability to do what the grant application says you're going to do. And so DataCore was a very critical component of our application, and our award is contingent upon that funding with DataCore. So we're respectfully asking for an approval of a contract with DataCore in accordance with the city's standard operating procedure for grant funding.
Ms. Sinan, so it sounds like there's going to be report generated and information, is that correct? So when will that stuff be available? So, I mean, if council members would like to see how, what the fruits of this project bears, when will we have a sense of that,
So it's a 5-year funding commitment. We always have end of project year reports. There are monthly reports. The reports are endless, Councilman, but there's certainly always an opportunity at the end of our fiscal year or at the end of each grant year to provide outcome reports. We are obligated to report to the federal government what we did. We have ongoing reporting requirements within reporting systems that they have. So we can generate reports at any time for you.
Would you be so kind as to generate like an updated report? It'd be interesting, and maybe send to an internal order. And if council members want to see the results, I think it'd be something they want to do. Could you do that for us?
Absolutely.
Great. Any other comments or questions by committee members?
No,
Council
sir.
members? We have a motion to recommend approval.
Motion to recommend approval.
By Majority Leader and
Second.
Vice Chair, second by Councilman Taylor. Discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item number 23. Thank you, Ms. Sinar. I think we're all set. Item number 23, Madam Clerk.
Resolution authorizing approval of the following contract awarded by the Board of Contract and Supply in accordance with Section 21-26A of the Code of Ordinances, Arrow USA Incorporated.
Great. And who is here for this one? Oh, Martina Haggerty. So Martina, Madam Clerk, could you please swear in Martina Haggerty, please?
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty and perjury that the testimony they are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes.
State your name and where you're from, please.
Martina Haggerty, Director of Special Projects in the city's planning department.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you much. So, Ms. Haggerty, can you tell us what Arup USA Inc. is going to do for the Unified Vision for Downtown Public in accordance with Code of Ordinance? I guess, it seems like the $1.6 million award. One, can you tell me, is this federal dollars? Is it grant money? Is it a combination? City? Can you just tell us where the dollars come from? And then can you tell us what the program is and what's the initiative? You have the mic.
Chairman, the funding comes from the city's capital improvement program, the most recent bond initiative, 2020A. And the project work really focuses on a series of public spaces in downtown, creating a unified plan for them. Those spaces include Water Place Park, the downtown Riverwalk, the skating rink, the pedestrian tunnels below Memorial Boulevard and Exchange Terrace, and the Central Plaza area within Kennedy Plaza. Modifications that the team is going to explore may include a cohesive lighting plan to promote safety and activate those spaces, shade structures, and 2 temporary liner buildings at the Providence rink, a utility plan for Water Place Park, the tunnels, and the Riverwalk, a programming plan for the Central Plaza area at Kennedy Plaza, and other related improvements. This may also include looking at climate resilience issues in Water Place Park, which floods quite often, and looking at what the city can do to make sure the utilities and infrastructure there is able to withstand upcoming climate change events.
So how long the company's going to come in, they get hired, and they're going to put together, it sounds like is it a combination kind of plan of like was it a public use plan and an environmental impact plan? Can you give me a little more substance? Because it sounds like you hit upon all different kinds of elements. Mm-hmm. So is there like a due date of the final product, or is it going to be like a series of products that they're going to produce?
Well, it's going to be a series of products over the next 6 months, assuming that whenever we get started, from 6 months after the start date, culminating with what we call about 30% plans, engineering plans, which will be able to provide us with a more solid plan to move forward with. So it will include a whole series of elements and sub-consultants ranging from electrical and utility work to environmental work, which you mentioned, to placemaking and programming and lighting. It'll also include sort of an overall plan for those spaces, an overall vision, document like you might see at a press event, that kind of thing that really maps out for the community and the stakeholders what the investments are proposed to be and what they might look like.
Treasurer, somebody have a question?
So this is a plan, correct? Not any physical. You mentioned lighting and different things. They're not actually putting the lighting in, are they?
No. This is a plan so that we can put those things in.
Okay. And just for the committee, this is a company out in New York City, correct?
This is a company that is based. They have offices, I think 11 offices all over the globe. They do have an office in New York City. We are working with contacts in the Boston office, though.
And you did mention some of the people will be local. Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you discuss I know that the bids were wide ranging, and you set up criteria. Mm-hmm. I know it went from, I don't know if I recall, 500,000 to maybe over 2 million or in that range. Can you just explain why and I did see the grid, but why you chose this company? I mean, it's a tremendous amount of money for a plan that may or may not ever happen. So I just want to want you to go through as to why you think that, this is the company that will put the plan together, and then the follow-through aspect.
Sure. So we explained this to all the proposers in the request for proposals that we issued. But for reference, all of the proposals were evaluated as to whether they were responsive or non-responsive to the requisites of the RFP. One was determined to be non-responsive because they did not submit forms or a cost proposal, among other issues. The responsive proposals were then evaluated and rated by a review committee from various departments and stakeholders as to how the proposals met both our needs for a project approach and what their project understanding was, their experience in doing similar things, all those detailed sub-consultants that we would require, and their references. Once the teams were scored on the technical criteria, the highest scoring teams were then evaluated based on their cost proposal. And Arup scored the highest, I believe, on the technical criteria that I described, and then scored the highest based on that overall analysis that included the cost.
And do we have the funds to follow through on this project?
Yes, we have, I'm looking for the exact amount right now, but I believe it is about $12.8 million from the capital improvement program scheduled to actually make these investments.
Thank you.
Will there be community outreach and that interaction?
Absolutely, that's a really critical part of that, and that was one of the project approach criteria that we were really impressed with this team. They had a very great understanding and some great local sub-consultants on board to help with community outreach, especially given what is going on with COVID right now, as well as the Black Lives Matter movement. We think community outreach is going to be really critical for this project.
Okay. Majority Leader, Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you explain what the community outreach is going to look like? I think it's great that you have community outreach, but what is it going to look like relative to this project?
Sure, and I will note that when we initially issued the RFP, it was before the pandemic. And so this has shifted a bit, and the team was very responsive in thinking about that shift with us. So in addition to online Zoom type meetings of community engagement, the team has also proposed to actually have staff from their team out there in Kennedy Plaza and in these public spaces, talking to the people that are out there using it, talking to the Ripter riders, talking to folks that might be walking through Water Place Park, and getting their input on the project through interactive boards that they might be able to point to with images and things like that, of course, while being respectful of social distancing requirements.
So that's essentially surveying the people that are in downtown Providence right now. What about the broader population that utilize downtown Providence?
Yes, and
owners?
Sure, and so we'll have that additional online public engagement via public hearings and public meetings via platforms like Zoom. We'll also have engagement with some of those critical stakeholders that surround these public spaces, like property owners and businesses, the Providence Foundation and the Rhode Island Foundation and such.
Have you engaged with RIDOT relative to the bus plan? How will that work?
That's a great question. So what we're looking at is the actual plaza area itself and the programming and the lighting of that. And the team has been instructed to not only coordinate with RIDOT and their team to make sure that the two plans work together, but our goal is to have this be adaptable so that it's something that works no matter what the layout of the buses or the traffic patterns surrounding the greater plaza area are.
What about the lighting of the canal, if you will? I know that, there's the Famine Memorial. We've had constant issues with lighting, it being knocked out. I mean, what is the plan for lighting that larger area that people tend to now even walk more with the added bridge over there? Is that connected as well? Is that part of the lighting scheme?
Yeah, the goal is to look at the whole Riverwalk area, the plaza, the rink, the tunnels, and Water Place Park, and come up with that cohesive lighting vision so that it all visually works together. And if you're walking through the city, you understand this is all connected, because right now it's very disjointed, but also to address those critical safety issues, to make sure that these places are well lit, to prevent any nefarious activities, but also to make people walking through really feel safe.
I just think, thank you very much for answering those questions. I just think it's an awful lot of money for a plan. I'm really having a hard time wrapping my head around spending $1.6 million when the city of Providence has such dire need for other infrastructure improvements. I think lighting is critical. Don't get me wrong. I know it's a safety issue. I just think that it's very high. It just strikes me as very pricey. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Councilwoman Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I just have a question, a little bit of a deeper dive into the coordination with RIDOT. Will the ARUP be taking any position on the location of the bus berths around Kennedy Plaza or in Kennedy Plaza?
That is not something that they have been tasked with to date. It is not part of the existing scope of work because that is being determined by Rhode Island DOT at this moment. However, this team is very, very capable of weighing in on those things. They've done many transit projects in other cities, and we feel confident in them having an advisory role in that, and potentially more if needed.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Castillo, did you have a question? Okay. Treasurer?
Just one more question. When is this project going to be completed?
This scope of work we are aiming to have completed in about 6 months. So right now, of course, depending on council approval, we would be hoping to issue a notice to proceed for them in November and have them wrap up in May.
And then the work would immediately begin?
The work could begin as early as late summer of next year into the fall. But because of the way the CIP bond initiative is laid out, it would likely bleed into the following spring and summer of 2022, I think.
And the reason why I asked that is what happens if it takes a while to do it and the next mayor doesn't agree that this is the way the money should be spent? Then we did a $1.6 million plan and we don't do the work. I mean, that's just it's a concern I have in the back of my head that we're going to have a plan, and we've done this, maybe not your department, but we have a million plans that don't get followed through with. If this is something the administration, is looking to do, the planning department, and the council, obviously, is this, we got to make sure that it happens, I guess, is my concern.
Understood.
Did you have a question?
No, I guess that's a statement.
Okay. Commissioner, I was just wondering, since we're talking, excuse me, another question. So you're talking about Water Place Park and those facilities, and since they're under the jurisdiction of the Providence Parks Department or Providence Parks Commission, will they be plugged into this conversation since that's the department that actually maintains those, the Riverwalk, Water Place Park, Burnside Park, all those places? So where are they in this conversation?
We're absolutely going to have them very engaged, Chairman. They were part of the selection for this, and we expect them to play a very significant role as we do other departments like sustainability, art, culture, and tourism, and DPW.
Because the planning department's about getting grants and then doing wide range planning, but we need to actually bring in the divisions and the departments that are actually going to be managing those things that you would like to try to build, right? The other thing is you talked about safety. Is the Providence Police Department, Fire Department, and Public Safety, where's their engagement piece? Because I think they would be very important to be part of this conversation about safety in the Water Place Park, safety in the Riverwalk, because part of the whole conversation is, if the idea is to attract people downtown Providence on one side. And then the other end, we don't build up the safety component, which on the other, on the other end, then you're gonna have a recipe for disaster, right? I mean, right now, the temperament is about, so right now, those two conversations are going in different directions. So where is the public safety, police department, fire department, and communications? They should always, where's their component in this conversation?
Yes, I imagine them being at the table, just like the Parks Department would be, having a heavy role in this. One of the things we've tasked the consultant with is really looking at crime prevention through environmental design. So creating spaces that are well lit and designed well so that they reduce some of those issues for the police and for fire.
Well, like, it's also the idea is how to make it safer for people to even want to walk in the city, right? I mean, right now, one of the biggest challenges, I just finished taking a walk, is that there's really not that many people in the city right now. Places are closed up, all the facilities are closed up, all the venues are closed up. Restaurants are either quarter or half capacity, and the other ones are boarded up. So try to get people, and I just went by one of the hotels, and that's closed. And so let's say, hey, come downtown and be willing to walk around here. We have a big challenge ahead of us right now because of what's happened to the city. The three crises is hitting it, right? So my position would be, it's very important. I think those two departments are definitely part and parcel to this conversation because without them, it won't work. Because then you end up building something that they can't manage, or you build something that they can't provide safety for, right? So I appreciate designers and engineers, but they also operate in a vacuum. I actually deal with a few of them. I've kind of had a little experience with engineers and designers and planners. I have a little experience with planners, and I realize sometimes they get caught in a vacuum, and then the product that comes out isn't necessarily as realistic as it can be because of what's really, of the actual going on to that particular locale. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yes, understood.
So I hope that's the case. The other quick thing is that the scope of work, wasn't the scope of work already wasn't there like an RFP that kind of generally explained what you guys are trying to achieve, right? Did they have some particulars already, what you want them to do for you?
Yes, right? Things like, it was defined in terms of things like specific deliverables that we want. We know we want a lighting plan that addresses safety issues. We know we need a utility plan to ensure utilities are accessible for programming and events and things like that. So that's pretty typical when we issue an RFP, is that we do that sort of thing.
Now, just in general, I mean, you did mention the cost factor. I mean, they're not the highest one. I guess the next highest bidder was 1.6 mil. And then, I guess, you're dealing with the technical scores, and I guess the one below them is about 1.47 mil. So I see the technical scores aren't that, well, they're okay. The overall score is not that far apart. I guess the question is, when you folks did the bid review, did you first do a technical review, score it, and then you get the value, and then apply the value? Is that what happened?
Yes, sir.
And is this kind of, now, I don't know, and I mean, I definitely sympathize and empathize with my majority leader because that, it is a big number, and we're also talking about spending another $12 million and all this kind of stuff. So that was a lot of stuff was pre-COVID. So the question is, with living in a post-COVID world now, it's going to be a book written about this, like a dystopian novel, right? This is all those dystopian books that kids love reading in high school and middle school. We're living it now, right? We're distant. We're talking on to a watch and a phone, and we're not interacting socially, and all venues are closed down. Everything is just changing so dramatically. Should there be part of the conversation that somehow that to take in consideration that we live in a post-COVID, COVID world, and, and in design plans, does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think there are going to be lasting impacts from what we're living through right now that impact how people live and navigate through our public spaces, that the team is actually very well prepared to consider. It was, again, one of the factors that we were really impressed by this specific team with was their thought about that and their thoughtfulness to it.
I think, Majority, did you have a follow-up question or concern?
I guess concern, pretty much, Mr. Chair. This is certainly a noble concept. It's a great, I appreciate the planning department and their efforts to make the city more walkable, well-lit, all of those things. I just think it behooves us to recognize that our downtown environment is not going to be the same for a long time. And I'm just questioning at this juncture. And one of the first things Ms. Haggerty stated was that this RFP and this plan was put together pre-COVID. Perhaps it would be prudent to, we've got, and my other colleague, Councilwoman Anthony, obviously she's concerned about coordination with RIDOT and the bus hubs. I just think that it would behoove us to take a step back and look at this expenditure and just thinking about COVID-19, the lighting downtown. I just don't. I think that there's other things that are critical needs. I guess maybe that's the best way of stating it. Versus putting $1.6 million into a plan that was conceived and crafted prior to COVID hit. It's a nice to have. I don't think it's a need to have. And quite frankly, CIP dollars are precious dollars. We have critical needs in our streets, our sidewalks, our sewer lines. I'm just wondering if this is the best expenditure at this time. Not that it isn't a wholesome and noble concept. And certainly, something we should be looking at. I just question the expenditure at this point. And maybe, and perhaps, my comment is that, maybe it needs to just be revisited, given the state of our city and state and country and world right now.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Councilwoman Anthony?
I'd just like to clarify, my question regarding coordination with RIDOT was just for information. It's not at all that I'm not supportive of this this proposal. I guess, while I understand, where we are in terms of the empty downtown, I think it's, and I do understand there's, that this is a lot of money. However, the investment in our downtown is critical to us getting ourselves out of this crisis. And so I feel that this is a placemaking opportunity for us to beautify, more than beautify, but this could transform the Kennedy Plaza and really be a huge, it could result in a huge economic boost for our downtown. I think anytime you are investing in an asset that's going to increase the economic activity, which I believe this will, I think it's critical that we move forward with it. So I just wanted to clarify my position on it.
Majority Leader?
Yes, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Anthony. I didn't mean to imply that you were opposed to it in any way, shape, or form. My point was that it is a valid issue, that there's a big, huge plan for downtown Providence, for changing our bus stations. I think that the world has changed since we went out for this RFP. And in my mind, I think that it would be prudent to maybe revisit if we can, relook at it to make sure that it makes sense for our new normal. And that's the point that I was making. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Internal order, what's the funding source for this $1.6 million?
It's the CIP.
Is that correct, Ms. Haggerty?
Yes.
And there's what, another $12 million in the CIP?
Approximately, yes.
Mr.
So-
Chairman?
Yes, Councilman Anthony, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. I was wondering if I see that we have Director Bonnie Nickerson on the line. Did she want to speak on this also? I don't know where she
I don't
went.
know.
Well, there she is.
She can, she's raising her hand. There you go.
I'm sorry.
I'm just following the rules of engagement. If you raise your hand, I'll acknowledge you. So we go.
I can't resist.
We're gonna maintain some decorum around here. I know it's not very, I know it's not to everybody's liking, but we're gonna maintain as much decorum. But of course, Director Nicholson, would you like to speak? If you do, then I'll have you sworn in, and then you can weigh in.
Thank you. I would like to thank.
Madam Clerk?
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name and where you're from, please.
For Bonnie Nickerson, Department of Planning and Development Director.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to make a few comments, and forgive me if they've been covered already. I'm just coming out of our PRA meeting this afternoon. Sorry to be tardy. In regards to the CIP, you know, each of the line items that I'm sure Martina mentioned that total that $12 million budget, those line items are infrastructure investments that we really do need to make. So addressing repairs, safety concerns, and other infrastructure investments that do need to happen. And so instead of each and every one of those line items going out for a separate design and engineering contract, you know, with most items in the CIP, there's a design and engineering expense associated with that line item. And in this case, for efficiency, it's really taking each and every one of those line items and combining them together so that we have a really efficient plan of how we are going to engineer these series of investments in Kennedy Plaza. So at the heart of what this is all about is really an infrastructure investment. And we're trying to do it in a way that's just efficient and smart given the resources. And I know when I joined, you were talking about parks, and you know, it really is a collaboration with the Parks Department and so many other departments, public safety, as you mentioned. But I did want to just say one word about kind of the role of this investment at this moment in time. You know, I've heard a really interesting conversation about we are in this very unique moment. And that was one of the things that we talked about quite a bit as a team and with folks that were submitting their proposals. What role, how has this project changed, you know, since the RFP went out in March? And it is really, really important that we think about the role of public space. Never has public space become more important than it is right now. And we see that through the public health lens. We see that through, you know, this idea around structural inequality and how that manifests. And we know that right now, the places that are sort of seeing a rebound during this time are small cities like Providence. People are considering where they want to live going forward. And it's places that have really robust outdoor public spaces that are faring well. Because when you decide where you want to be, and maybe you realize you have more choice, you don't have to live right next to, you know, in a downtown next to your job. Small cities like Providence that can invest in having really high quality public spaces where you can be outside and do a lot of your day-to-day, you know, life outside, I think are going to fare really well. And so I think it's just important for us to keep in mind, you know, we are in this strange time, but we're investing for the future, not just for infrastructure, but also the way, you know, the city comes out of this, and the way the city comes out of this in a really, in a way that positions us for the future. So I don't want us to lose sight of the opportunity to invest in ourselves in a way that sets us on a really positive, in a positive direction going forward. And I've heard this over the past couple of days. Secretary Pryor talked to the Providence Foundation this week and was really talking about how Rhode Island is so well positioned because we have these amazing public spaces. If people want to be outside, we have all of these kind of natural assets. And I just don't want us to lose sight of that. I think it's really important that we don't shy away from making these strategic investments at this critical time, even though we are in a strange moment. We will get past this, and I want us to be in a stronger position when we emerge from this.
Treasurer, Ms. Lombardi?
What's the area we're speaking about? What the plan is for? What area?
The plan includes Water Place Park, the Riverwalk in downtown, the tunnels, the pedestrian tunnels underneath Memorial Boulevard and Exchange Terrace, the area surrounding the Providence rink, the skating rink, as well as the Central Plaza area at Kennedy Plaza.
And does it go into downtown, like I'm going to say the old Fleet Building, going back that way, or that it stops at Kennedy Plaza?
Yeah, we're looking at those public space gathering spaces primarily.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Nickerson, you mentioned that you're seeing evidence. It sounds like you're seeing evidence or information that downtown is on the upswing post-COVID. Can you explain to me the empirical evidence you have that show those indicators that are showing that downtown people are, I guess, moving here and all this stuff is happening as we're speaking? But what indicators are you looking at? Because I'm seeing other ones, so I'm trying to understand which ones you're looking at, because the ones we're looking at, I don't see what you're seeing. So can you tell me what indicators are you looking at? What empirical evidence are you showing? I'm not talking about pre-COVID, I'm talking about post, that there are people moving into downtown Providence. I'm not talking about the college kids, but in a sense of permanency of this is the place to be. So what indicators are you looking at, and what empirical information you have? It must be like, it's got to be fresh. It's only been the past like month or 2 months, if anything at all. So can you help me with that?
Yeah, I'm just sharing conversations that I've been in. I'm not looking at data sets, as you say. This information is fresh, and it's not specific to downtown Providence. But I've been part of conversations that are showing that smaller cities like Providence are faring comparatively well when you look at other cities like New York, San Francisco, Boston. Folks are choosing smaller cities, Portland, Maine, Providence, and others are seeming to be more attractive. And the data that someone was discussing with me, again, these are anecdotal conversations. I'm not going to pull up charts and graphs for anyone. I think that we're in the middle of it. But they were actually tracking cell phone data and where people have actually shifted, where there have been some demographic shifts from March until now. And they're showing that smaller cities are sort of absorbing some of the population that is shifting out of larger cities. And I think my point being not so much to say, look what we're seeing, but to not lose sight that we are well positioned to perhaps emerge strongly from this as a site that has a lot to offer, as people do maybe think twice about being in downtown Boston, New York, and some other cities. We shouldn't lose sight that we have, I think, strategic assets that are going to become even more appealing and more attractive as people decide where they want to live, because they don't have to necessarily co-consider where you want to live and where you want to work, as there may be more choices of where you want to live. And I just was bringing that up as something for us to keep in mind. And I think it's something that we should feel good about and be hopeful about. And it's a reason to continue on the path that we're on and investing in ourselves, investing in having wonderful quality public realm and outdoor spaces, because those particular spaces have become so much more important. And I think the people realize how important it is to make those spaces available. That was my point. Thank you for the opportunity to clarify.
Thank you. The data I'm seeing is a little bit, it's a totally different conversation. Just the train traffic alone, is dramatically talking about almost an 80% drop in ridership in the entire East Coast corridor. And that's as of today. That's not like last week. But things, there's dramatic drops in that kind of. With that said, it's not necessarily downtown proper. Potentially, when they say cities, maybe the people may be moving into the neighborhoods of the particular cities, because this way you have a little space, right? Is any of this conversation about maybe doing like updating or upgrading? Let's call it what we learned during this process is all about bandwidth. I mean, if this COVID-19 hit us a mere 10 years ago, we would not have the bandwidth, the capacity to be doing what we're doing right now for people to actually work from home. It just didn't exist, the infrastructure. It's a fact, right? It's kind of an irony where we became so advanced with our bandwidth and the availability and the network, that's, the internet network, that you're actually able to do what we're doing right now as we're speaking this evening. And of course, this technology alone, the Zoom technology it's advanced in the past 3 months dramatically, the software system, and it's amazing what's going on. Is any component in this, any component, or could we put a component dealing with that aspect? Because it seems that we need to expand that kind of infrastructure in if you went to a public space or in the downtown area, we need to have the availability of bandwidth and that infrastructure for the growth of that. Is that I don't see it in this. Is that could be something to be part of this program? Because it seems to me that we are here now. The future that we thought was going to be there 10, 15 years is now, it's right in front of us today. Business models are changing, and they're going to permanently change. I read an article, over 700,000 people moved out of New York City. And the people that summer in the Hamptons, traditionally New York City, have extended their stay in the Hamptons. They're not even coming back. So that is a major conundrum going on over there, as well as Portland, Seattle, all these other cities that are just in complete mess with anarchy and unrest and rioters and every night violence. I mean, that's not attracting people to come to those cities. It's saying, I need to, and I do agree with you that small subset cities have an ability and opportunity to maybe, in a sad way, benefit from those kinds of events, meaning, because people say, I can't live in New York City, it's not working, right? Or I can't live in Boston proper. So, can part of the component be part of that, part of the technological component? Besides safety and lighting, it seems to me we need to beef that up in the city area. Is that something that can be part of this scope of work or RFP?
I think that's an excellent point. When we think about infrastructure, we just need to think about technology access as part of infrastructure. And particularly now when we talk about utilizing space outside, even for classrooms, and we're talking with universities of how to allow them to hold classes outside and workshops. And so we should really be thinking, and I know the state is thinking the same way, how do we just think of technology access as part of infrastructure? So in all of our public spaces, how great if we could be holding classes and doing all these things, this idea of like sort of turning everything that we do on the inside, turning that out. And I agree, and absolutely, I think we should that in this.
I would like to see that as part of the component. I mean, I know in some major cities like Tokyo and some of the cities that I'm aware of, they've already kind of invested in like super hotspots. I mean, free Wi-Fi. It sounds, but it's there. It's been happening for years because that access does a couple of things, of course. First of all, for my community, which, I don't represent any 1%ers. So my community is the folks that, the ones on the cusp searching, that need access. They're not part of the 1%ers of the city of Providence. They're the folks that have got 2 or 3 jobs, the folks that struggle. So that's something that's a great need for them, right? So if we expand our public spaces, that we even have greater, I'm just saying internet, but all that kind of technological access, it then gives greater opportunities, at least the people that the cross-section of folks that I represent, not just the 1%ers who can afford it on their own. And I said it before, so again, my job is to give a voice to the voiceless. I hear enough from the people who have the wealth that it's easy for them, but it's not for the folks that don't. So that's something I would love to see. It should be part of this concept, this conversation. So, I don't know, Ms. Haggerty, Ms. Nickerson, is that something that you could do? Because my take is, if we hadn't spent $12 million, my mind is, part of that money a technological component should be part of it, advancing in internet technology and hotspots in these public spaces. Fountains, I get that, but if we don't have, that's what they need. I mean, that's what the kids need. That's what these businesses need. I mean, this is what they need right now. And the same need's gonna exist tomorrow. It's not going away. In fact, the appetite is growing, not shrinking.
Right.
Right? So.
I think your point is well taken about, rethinking the role of what these spaces can be and should be as we think in the future. And absolutely, I think that's got to be just part of the basic infrastructure that we consider. And so absolutely, we will weave that into this process.
I'd love to see that because that's something that creates an additional attractive element.
Right.
To public spaces, and people will say, well, do I want to come here? Do I want to live here? Do I want to live in Silver Lake or Hartford Avenue or Plainfield Street? Or the public space we can go there, and then other public spaces we can expand to other public spaces.
Right.
So, with that, Majority Leader, Vice Chair.
You just got me, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You got me thinking, this is clearly something that we're building, not for now. There's going to be quite some many months that transpire before we start to build anything or see any construction. My question was, if we're building in the future, what components of this plan include building for the future regarding, sustainable energy? Are there solar lights? Are there any wind power? What components of the plan focus on energy-wise construction, or I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I love the idea that the chairman spoke about making sure that our open space, particularly in the inner city, has connectivity for those who need it, as well as the different needs of our business community, changing needs of our business community. But could you talk a little bit about sustainable energy and what components of the plan address that?
Sure, Bonnie, I can take this one if you'd like. So not only looking at the lighting, do we have an opportunity to think about how that lighting is sourced and powered, but especially looking at the liner buildings that we're proposing around the rink building. That's where I think there's a great opportunity to think about developing those in a sustainable.
I'm sorry, what is a liner building? What do you
small, narrow-ish buildings that would surround the rink area to provide extra space for programming and facilities related to operations of the rink.
So building those structures as part of this plan as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then we also have the opportunity to look at sustainability of Water Place Park and the Riverwalk itself. I mentioned earlier that we're looking at sort of the long-term impacts of sea level rise and flooding events associated with major storms. And so it's a really great opportunity for us to integrate those in a better way.
Is there also, I think that sustainability is a valid component, if I may dovetail, Vice Chair.
Go for it.
Yeah, it's like just even the ebb and flow of the tide of the water basin, like maybe harnessing some of that energy. I mean,
Yes.
if you're looking to truly make this something special, you have an opportunity, talking about this, but I think you need to expand your scope and not, because it was pre-COVID, so you're looking a lot of ways you're looking traditionally, and it's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But we're all those, past 4 or 5 months, we've been teleported into the future. I mean that sincerely, in such a dramatic fashion. So, you really have an opportunity to do something else, like, create maybe some type of energy generating sources. I agree, like whatever they are, windmills or
Yeah.
I've seen those wave motion energy systems, all that kind of stuff. Just I know it sounds, but it can also then help the city with its own value. Because here's the problem: the city's finances are tenuous at best. Okay, and we basically have the pay-as-you-go custom. That's what we are. Like, you have a customer that will pay credit, and you have a customer that pays cash. The city of Providence is a customer that every institution says you have to pay cash. They don't want to give us credit. You get my point? Because we're pay-as-you-go. The health, our medical is a pay-as-you-go. It's $100 million. For all intents and purposes, our pension plans are pay-as-you-go. I mean, that's a fact. Okay, that's about $200 million that out of the $350 million we generate. Just so you get a sense of what's going on. So anything can also enhance those locations, but also not be a greater burden on the maintenance of it, the sweat equity that we have to hire people to maintain them, the electric bills, the heating, all that stuff has to be part of this in a dramatic fashion. And I agree with Majority Leader, she's spot on, because that is what you need. It's kind of like I'm sure everybody, if you ever heard about it, if you go to Disneyland or the Universal places, they have like these, they've spend so much money on that sustainability aspect, growing their own food, creating their own energy. I mean, they realize that in order to have what they have and to be sustainable presently and in the future, they create their own kind of sources of energy and systems. So that should be part of it. I just dovetail and support the Vice Chair on that. She's absolutely right. And Vice Chair, you have the mic.
Thank you. I appreciate where you're going, and I kind of am circling back now to what I spoke about, and it's the use of these dollars. Based on the condition of the city of Providence finances, we need to be ever mindful of our expenditures, and I recognize this is a futuristic need for sure, but we're borrowing these dollars. The CIP isn't something we've saved up for. We're borrowing dollars for critical infrastructure needs. And if we're going to be borrowing dollars, it means the taxpayers are paying for it twice. We need to make sure that it's creative. It's a creative use. It's an exciting use. And I think, I think the framework is there. I like where you're going, but I do think that we need to be more broad in our perspective on what our future needs are going to be. And we talked about collaborating with partners, critical partners, the Parks Department, and I think that Ms. Haggerty mentioned that as well. That you're going to be collaborating with them, but they're a critical partner in this. Maintaining this space, maintaining the resources, maintaining the infrastructure, it needs to be paying for itself, not be a future burden. We're going to be borrowing funds to pay for infrastructure. We don't want to have to pay for it again down the line. So that's my thoughts on it, and I thank you very much for being so receptive to listening to us and answering our questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So I think, Ms. Nickerson and Ms. Haggerty, I think when you go down the road, I mean, if the committee recommends approval, I think it's something you need to, when you come back with this plan, those components should be part of it. I mean, I'm strongly suggesting, because the next ask is gonna be, you wanna spend $12 million, right? So if you look, so that's even the bigger ask, right? So I would ask that you would definitely put those kind of components in it. And actually think of it this way, this is the beginning of your outreach conversation, right? Right now, this is what this is about, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So ask you remember that, because then later on, when council are gonna still have a conversation, we have this continuing conversation. Vice Chair, Majority Leader?
Sorry, one more thought. Could I ask the treasurer or our auditor to explain to us, for the record, the use of CIP dollars? What is it? What is our capacity for utilization of those funds? Is it a critical need? Is it a essential need? Please define how we can spend those dollars, or are we, governed in any way relative to our expenditures? I don't know who's best to answer, but.
May I respond, Madam Leader?
I don't know.
That's the chairman's call. I asked for our finance team to provide an answer.
Yep, right.
I
First,
can
I'm
answer that.
Mr. Lombardi?
So when you go out, well, first of all, it has to be within the structure of the ordinance that set up the bond. So clearly, it has to be in some form. I assume it does say somewhere in the bond, unless they're using a miscellaneous account, that there would be engineering involved. Then the engineer, you just couldn't do a study for engineering technically. You would have to do a study and do the infrastructure, which again is in the CIP. So it had the overall length of the project. So for example, you couldn't go out and give somebody money. You couldn't go out and do different things. The length, so the asset must last longer than the bond. So you couldn't do I'm going to say 5-year, something that its useful life is 5 years when you have a 20-year bond, or at least I wouldn't recommend doing it. And I don't think bond counsel would approve that. But in this situation, it's totally, I'm going to say, up to the council. It seems like a permitted use. I wouldn't say that it isn't, as long as they follow through with the project itself. So I would say that the infrastructure that they're looking to do will last longer than the bond, or expected to last longer than the bond, and that it would fit within how the bond should be spent.
And then my one last question is, does the plan that we're looking at, or that's before us, prescribe an infrastructure expenditure that is within the confines or the limits that is available through our CIP funding?
And I can't answer that.
Jordan.
So Ms. Day would like to answer. Ms. Day, can you, Madam Clerk, can you swear Ms. Day in? And she'd like to.
Please raise your right hand. You swear on the penalty and perjury that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Help you God.
I do.
Please state your name and state your name.
Jordan Day, Senior Deputy Chief Operating Officer for the City of Providence.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ms. Day. Like to weigh in?
Yes, I'm happy to. So I worked with Martina as she prepared the budget and this RFP, and the entire team that worked together on this RFP. And so all of the architectural and engineering costs that are associated with this RFP and this firm that we're working with, all of that is built on projects that are already currently funded or proposed for funding, and they have been identified as, if they are pending, we have identified those funding sources as pending. So anything that has already been approved has been outlined for them. And so the idea there is that that would be planned for as we have already provided them a draft budget based off of the project list that's been approved. And to the treasurer's point earlier, we are allowed to pay for studies as long as it has a direct result into capital work. And so that this would be an allowable activity. It's also something that we're doing for another facility. We Atwell Fire Station is going to require an environmental study. We're going to do that as well as make physical improvements to the building in alignment with that study, as long as we can, and also plan for future improvements. So this is a kind of a standard thing that is done across the board. Just to touch on also the leader's question a few moments ago regarding the definition, really capital work is defined as something that will have a long term, a long lasting lifetime. So things that would be anywhere from 20 to 30 years. We are allowed to utilize it for temporary structures as needed in the construction process, or something that would be turned into a more permanent capital project. But those are all things that are allowable activity. And I guess I would defer to Larry to speak more about what our bond counsel would say on that. But I would say in the terms of the contract and this project, these are all in alignment with what we've already been advised we're able to do by bond counsel.
I guess, Ms. Day, I guess my concern is, and thank you very much for that. That was a great explanation. I appreciate it. Are we buying a long-term obligation, and how do we mitigate that? That's really at the root of my concern. You know, we're going to be putting in these lighting structures. Who's going to pay for it? How are we going to fund it? Are we, you know, we're talking about CIP dollars, and you know, they're essential, you know, critical infrastructure improvements that, you know, have a long life, and that's great. My question is there, by planning for these infrastructure changes, are we buying into an obligation down the road, and what does that cost to us? How we're going to pay for it down the road?
So I would say, just being honest, if we have already borrowed the funds for the $126 million worth of projects that we identified and was approved by this body in January, then we have the funding available for those projects. And if the project became unfeasible, that's something that I would work with, of course, the council, the project management team, and our bond counsel, along with our finance team, to determine what our next steps would be, because I think that would be a much broader conversation. And to your points that have been made throughout the course of this discussion, we're in a much different place. I know that Martina and Bonnie have been really thoughtful, and they have engaged the vendor in the interview process and engagement along the way. And so I know that this is something that's at the forefront of their minds. So I think if that was something that we were concerned about, we would reconsider. With that said, I think that this is a priority, and this is important to do to improve our downtown environment. And I think that there are a lot of things that need to be addressed more broadly. I know that Martina's touched on a bunch, like lighting and some of the infrastructure and water place, and how we will make improvements there. These are long-term plans, and I think we need to be strategic, but we also know that there are different touch points along the way where decisions will be made regarding funding and next steps. And so I think it's important to note that we will design to whatever funds we do have. We will be creative if there is a change in scope. And those are conversations that we would engage folks in along the way.
Just want to make sure we can keep the lights on down the road.
Absolutely, I hear you. I don't think that is at the forefront of all of our minds. These are significant investments, and we want to make them wisely.
And you need to make sure that you make an amendment to your plan to allow for some type of a sustainable energy source for those lights, so that it keeps our bill down. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Turn of order. Turn of order.
Thank you.
Have a
Sorry,
question?
I'm having issues with my mute button. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question, hypothetically, the CIP is currently in the Finance Committee for discussion and approval. If if they went in the direction that they wanted to look at more essential spending in the CIP and do more roads and sidewalks and projects that are already in the CIP and just expand upon them. And hypothetically, these projects are not there. Who is responsible for paying this bill if the projects do not happen? Would that go back to the city as an expense?
That would be something I would need to confirm with bond counsel. That's not a question. Sorry, I'm not confident in an answer, and so I would rather get back to you with a response to let you know what the appropriate action would be. And I would trust bond counsel to provide that for us, unless Larry had anything that he would be able to provide immediately. Larry, you're muted, but I think you shook your head no.
No, I don't have an opinion on what would happen in that case, Madam Auditor, but I'd be happy to provide the answer if that's a point of contention. But I do want to say that most of the projects associated with the bond issue are brick and mortar projects. The treasurer testified earlier, and I was about to supply the same information, that generally the useful life of the asset should be at least the length of the bond issue. I think in most cases that is accurate. While we can't predict the future, the repayment of the bond is obligated by appropriation. You know that. That's one of the main conditions of a borrowing and underwriting. And I would defer to Department of Planning on what aspects of this project would change if a funding stream changed in the future. Somewhat hard to predict today, but if the project has merit, I would recommend, and I certainly would support its approval.
One more question, Mr. Chair.
Yep, Madam Auditor.
These are a combined engineering study and everything for all of the projects. How is this being disseminated on the CIP as the expense? Each project getting a percentage of the expense? How is that working?
So I know that we broke it down specifically in our budget preparation, which I believe was included in the RFP. I can work with Martina to send you that breakdown so you can understand exactly which lines it comes out of across the board.
Okay, I was just making sure it was disseminated against for all of the projects. That's all, and that it wasn't its own line item. Okay, that's all.
Not its own line item. It's broken down. Some of it does fall into specific lines that are intended for this, but there are some individual projects that we pull percentages out of for them.
All right. Any other comments or questions by committee members? Councilmember.
No, Mr. Chair.
No, Mr. Chair.
We entertain a motion to item number 23.
I'll make a motion.
Councilman Anthony makes that motion. Have a second?
Was that, I'm sorry, what motion did I make?
I don't know.
To recommend. Yes, I made a motion to recommend. Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I didn't.
Councilman Anthony makes the motion to recommend. Do I have a second?
I am making a motion to recommend. Thank you.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Councilman Taylor. Further discussion? I would just ask that Ms. Nickerson, Ms. Haggerty, that you add those elements to the scope. I think it's imperative if we're going to do that. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Nickerson, Ms. Haggerty. Thank you. Four. Next item number 4, please. Item number 24.
Discussion relative to current social services in Providence. Following has been invited. Hillary Salmon, Executive Director, Providence Baptist Schools Alliance.
So, as our ongoing, I believe Ms. Solomon is on the line, right? Most positive. Let's see. Did we lose her?
I never saw her.
She's on. She's on. I can see her.
She's on attendees.
and attendees.
I can't, for some reason, do you have access to the attendee list?
I'm looking at it right now.
My computer, my laptop.
Everybody, can we just hold on for a second so we can address the technical difficulty, if everybody's okay with it? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Ms. Sammons, can you hear us?
I can hear you now, yes. Why would-
Are you the only one that testify on this one? I gotta talk about, okay, great. So let's swear you in, and then we can talk about what great work you've achieved. Madam Clerk?
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to penalty of perjury that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, yes, I promise.
State your name and where you're from, please.
What was the question?
State your name. State your name.
Hillary
and where you're-
Sanders. Hillary Sanders, Executive Director of the Providence After School Alliance. And thank you so much for inviting me. I'm honored to be here.
First of all, thank you for attending. We'll do full disclosure. I have been fortunate enough to know Ms. Sammons for, I want to say, I hate to say it, almost 2 decades now, almost, something like that, roughly. I think it's about that long, and she was a zealous advocate of actually creating this TASA program, and we're all going to hear about, but I know it's also about the interaction with the Providence Police Department also, I believe, right? And we're going to talk about that aspect. And
happy to.
I'm sure my council colleagues who haven't met her or just got to know her, I mean, I'm sure they've seen her and her folks at the different schools about the city of Providence and providing an excellent program for our children. And actually, I see teachers out there too interacting and programs for the school system and for the kids in our neighborhood. So I want to right off the bat commend her and her staff and their program. They've done an awful lot. I mean, I think last time I saw you because of pre-COVID, it was like at the end of the school year, you had this big, I think it was last summer, had this big event in my neighborhood, and it was something, it was quite an event, so, and she was running
Not
around.
as big as your events, and you admitted to me that your events, he's bragging how big his event is, much bigger than mine. It's because he gives them hot dogs, and I didn't have the hot dogs.
I give free food, and I get free food and it's a free carnival for the kids in the neighborhood. Remember that? It's a whole, so we
That's
shut
the
down the
secret.
entire street. It's a whole carnival for the kids, the whole neighborhood. So it's a totally different thing. Unfortunately, this year we weren't able to have it because of COVID. I mean, so, but I want to just mention that. I know I'm giving you a little accolade at the beginning, but I think it's important we know that. Me personally, I've actually, I want to thank you at the beginning. First of all, thank you for coming tonight. Second, I want to thank you on behalf of my constituents because, Hillary's program throughout the years has done, it's been a wonderful asset for the city of Providence, and I want to thank her. And also, by the way, part of this conversation is the continual conversation of the interaction of, let's call it like it is, of the work that the Public Safety Division, in this case, the Providence Police Department does. And as we learned just recently, not more than a couple weeks ago, how the Providence Police Department, working through Family Services and Providence Center, has all these interactive social emergency service programs that they've been using for years, in which a lot of people around the council table didn't even know existed. Thought something, and it was important that we start highlighting, as far as my position is, there's a lot of positive things happening in Providence, a lot of positive things that have happened in the Providence Police Department. They've come a long way, and they've done a great job on the Chief Clemens, and they've done a great job reaching out to partners throughout the city who've made a better city. And I know the past several months have been troubling for many different reasons, but it's not perfect. But the City of Providence's police department, under the helm of Chief Clements, and by the way, Verdi, and prior to that, they have done a lot of great work, and I think it's important that we keep on highlighting that. Yes, we address the problems, and yes, we try to make the system better, but we don't ignore the positive stuff that's happening. And I think, at least lately, the whole world, the whole country, the city, everyone wants to generate out all the negativity. Everybody's like in the negative. Everybody's a victim. Everybody's got a negative problem. No one wants to talk about some of the greatness, the positive stuff that's happening in this great country, this great city, and what's happening with the great people we represent. So I've been using this forum as to moving towards that, going that way. We had the earlier forums, and it was very adversarial and cantankerous, and it was just a tsunami of negative energy. If you didn't know any better, you would think there's not one good thing in the city of Providence, and that's a disservice, because at least I'm concerned. The people I represent, they get up every day, they're trying to raise their kids every day, they're trying to go to work every day. And they want to live in the city, and they want to live in the neighborhood, and they want to feel good about living where they live. And if every elected official, all they say is everything's so bad, I don't know. I think it's a disservice. You're doing a disservice to your constituents. You've got to be honest, but you should talk about the positive stuff. So I just want to kind of get a little understanding where, as chair of this committee, what we've been trying to achieve, because the negativity needs to be turned down. We need to address problems, but we need to also magnify the positive. So if that's it, Hillary, thank you for coming this evening. I'm glad you could attend. And could you talk about a little bit of your background about positive, and then also the interaction with the Providence Police Department, and how is it going? What's been going on? The positive, the negative, what's the good stuff? What's some of the stuff that you think we could work on? And this is all part of reaching to our partners and getting, real concrete feedback, positive, negative, versus just simply anecdotal or knee-jerk reaction of whatever the day's event. So you have the mic, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you all. And thank you, City Matos, for inviting me. You are terrific in meeting. I know I sent an update to you all, and appreciate the fact that City Council President Sabina Matos sent out my report when I reported to her, and I wanted you all to know that after school was alive and kicking in the first months of COVID, we were making phone calls and really backing up the school department calling all our families, checking on them, making sure Chromebooks were hooked up and connecting. And it's interesting when you have a crisis, you end up working more closely together, and never did we work more closely with the school department, and they did a fabulous job. And the city is to be applauded for giving so many kids Chromebooks so that we could all get to a virtual learning and virtual after school and virtual summer youth employment. So we built on that and did a summer youth employment program that was a mix. We kind of tried to experiment in the space of a mixture of virtual programs. And we funded about 18 or 20 virtual programs building off of our community-based organizations, and everything from fashion making to Woonasquatucket River exploration. We also did some real-time programming, some orientation for ninth graders to several high schools, and we did some virtual programs for them. So we had about 160 youth experimenting in the virtual space with us, because we really wanted to demonstrate how do we get it right with the after school, our 30 different community partners, so that we could really make a dent in this year. We were really excited to do a partnership with PVD makers and the libraries, and we helped staff the 3 tents where the kids came and could walk to those 3 libraries to do some virtual maker programs. Again, because we wanted to see if we could get the health protocols right so that we could gear up for this fall and make sure we could follow the governor's protocols, and we did a very good job of it. I actually got some requested by the Nellie Mae Foundation if there were any programs that needed summer money. I said, give me 2 days. I called 15 groups, and I basically got $5,000 of operation money automatically from the Nellie Mae Foundation because they trusted me, and I made it just go out to groups, youth voice, young voices, youth in action, down city design, Boys and Girls Club, bing, 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 send them $5,000 each for operating costs. But in that process, you will be pleased, Chairman Igliozzi, that I commissioned the one-on-one basketball group to try basketball at the Recreation Center of the New Connecutt, because Ray Tattaglia, who's one of my favorite people on the planet Earth, had partnered with Frank Luca. And I said, let's see if we can get a 1-week basketball program going. And we did. We got a week's notice. We got 20 youth. Ray recruited half and we recruited the other half. And they were there every day for 4 days. Desperado kiddos who were locked in their house and can't exercise. And Frank had done 6 of these programs in the wealthy neighborhoods. And my big thing is opportunities for youth, for kids who don't have families that are taking them and paying for the RISD art program or paying for the sailing program. I want our kids, so equal access, opportunity, and equity is a top priority for us as we try to reach, on a normal year, 2,000 youth a year. Now, we do not have a normal year ahead. So before I get to the police and how amazing they are as a partner, along with the school department, the most amazing partners are stepping up right now. The city has helped us partner with the Recs department because I knew we wouldn't get in the school buildings. I knew 6th graders were going to be 7th and 8th out of class. I knew 10th, 11th, 12th were going to be out of class. And I knew these kids had nothing to do for the summer and they needed stuff to do. And we needed some real outdoor, take it outside, said the governor. I'd had a plan for taking it outside. So we are going to be at 4 rec centers. The Newt's one of them. Yay, I've got the Newt. And we're going to be at Buckland. Oh my God, who invested in Buckland? That place is like glorious. Once I knew, I drove around my car on Monday. I took pictures. I was ecstatic. Buckland looks gorgeous. Thank you for investing. And then we're going to be at the South Side. And then we're going to be at the Zucolo, where Jackie Julio found I was sneaking around, and he said he had a PASA certificate from his training 15 years ago. And these rec directors are calling going, we should have done this 15 years ago, Salmons. I go, I know. But the schools are closed. We're coming in, and the partnering is going to be fabulous. We are going to follow all the rules, and I hope we can get 50 kids at each site, 4 sites, so maybe 100. 2 days, 50 kids, 2 days, another 50 kids, mixed in middle and high. And I GPS mapped all the zip codes of where the kids live and where their schools are, and they're concentrated in the West End, South Side, Onlyville, wouldn't you know it? So we don't have to pay for buses. We figured out where they're all gonna match, and they're gonna walk to those rec centers, and I'm gonna provide all the funding for the programs, and we'll team up with the directors. We're gonna meet with them next week. I am so psyched that finally, after 17 years, we're gonna partner more with the rec centers, yes! So partnering with schools, partnering with the mayor's office, partnering with rec centers, we partner with the zoo. The most, and a lovely partner is the police department. The chief is on my board. We hire officers to team up with our sports programs every year with private money, not city money. We love the money we get from you guys. It enables us to master plan this all. But the reality is I get private money from IGT, to pay for the police officers to team up with our sports providers, because I really feel if the youth are going to really understand the police officers as community leaders, they need to have a relationship with them, and vice versa. The officers are doing the night shifts and they get a little, burn out on seeing intense stuff. They need to see the young people in their community as partners and as friends. And so that coaching thing has been fabulous. When I asked the police department to do a active shooter training to come out to the schools, because the school department didn't do an active shooter training for us after school, but the administration leaves, there's no secretaries up front, we're manning the building. But Mike Wheeler comes over, they do that, they train us so that we can protect your kids. And I've called the chief last week and said, if I'm in 4 rec centers outside, I need Mike Wheeler to come back and run through that scenario, because we're gonna be out in fields and more exposed. What would I do if I didn't have the police department? Knowing that I could call on them and that they're there for us all the time. So if it weren't for this like public-private partnership of the schools, the rec centers, the libraries, the city council, the mayor's office, the private sector, I could not do what I do. And I totally believe that together we can deliver for our kids in these COVID times. And I am not gonna I'm not gonna have them stuck at home if they can safely be in a pod of 10 or 12 kids kicking a ball around. Or if Frank's cleaning those basketballs at home every day in bleach and they can shoot some hoop. I want our young people doing real stuff before we get the weather to change and they're on lockdown all year. So I'm going crazy, pushing to make sure this happens in 2 weeks. And if it does, and there are a lot of kids at the new, Mr. Iglesias, I may invite you back.
So, Hillary, you do not disappoint, first of all. Second of all, I made a big mistake, so I apologize to my committee, my council colleagues, because months ago, I should have invited Hillary during all those cantankerous meetings and hours of negativity, because if Hillary was in that meeting, I know that it would have helped turned around the tide of negativity, because this is the kind of person who lives in the city of Providence, is dedicated to the city of Providence, and is Providence. And I tell you, kudos to you.
I'm going to be honest with you. I have to do a confession. I'm a little biased on the police department because my son, Pete Sammons, is a police officer. And I never thought this Moses Brown kid that went to, very expensive liberal arts education would turn to me one day and say he wanted to be a Providence police officer. And I'm not allowed to ever talk to him. He'd go mental even to us talking about him now, because he's wants to be operating on his own merits. He's got nothing to do with me and my talking to the chief. But I can honestly tell you that I can have honest conversations with him. And I shared with him a fabulous article in the New Yorker that Jill Lepore wrote about the history of our police department being connected to slavery. And I kind of had eyes where I didn't really want to see it. I didn't really want to read the article. But when I read the article, it was so compelling. I gave it to my son, and along with another New Yorker article, leave me alone, Dad, another New Yorker article that was about the police unions and how difficult they are and how challenging they are. And I feel good about our police department enough so that I can give my son those 2 articles and say, we need to talk about this. And in talking to the chief about active shooting support, I said, Chief, my son is reading these 2 articles, and I think they should be part of your training. We really need to look at where the institutional structures that exclude our community, what does that history come from? How does our young, diverse officers, that 65% minority class and the 45% minority, how do they actually engage in a conversation with their fellow white officers about those institutional structures? So I'm not going to shy away from the Black Lives Matter team as long as we can engage in honest, real discussions with each other. And I feel like the Providence community, we work together so well, we can share those kinds of stories and articles and really have grievances with each other. I can tell you my whole staff is meeting around diversity and race and equity, and they're not allowing me into the meeting, and I'm going to give them money to hire a consultant so that we do an audit on our own organization. We all have to be held accountable, and there's a constructive way to do this. We don't have to be negative. We have to be really constructive, but we have to be honest about the history we've inherited, which has been fraught. So I'm the first one to recognize that department. They know they've got work to do, but they will do it, I think, when we all team up and are honest and have good discussions about what is this history, how does the young next generation correct it?
Thank you. Well said. Questions by committee members?
Yes.
Majority Leader, Vice Chair.
First of all, I would like to say, Hillary, thank you so much for all you do.
Oh, thanks.
You are remarkable. Your commitment and your service to the city of Providence is truly remarkable. And moreover, your excitement tonight is just so refreshing. Thank you. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to make a motion to invite you to all of our council finance meetings, because you just certainly made this meeting very
interesting. You're going to scare John. Don't do that.
not at all. He sings your praises every day. But the reality is you're doing wonderful work with little funds and being creative and serving our kids and addressing some real serious challenges that we have. So I just want to say I don't have any questions for you other than to say what more can the council do to keep you doing your good work, because I'm all for supporting you in any way that I can. And I know a number of my council colleagues feel the same way. So I just wanted to be the first to say thank you.
Oh, thank you. I've never felt so supported by the council, I can honestly tell you. And I really want to thank Sabina for reaching out. And when I give her information, she goes, oh, could you write that up? And I'd like to send it around to the whole council. I'm just so delighted that you guys care and that we're all in this together for our young people. So I thank
the council president is one of your big fans too.
Well, she's been good at helping disseminate the information, and I appreciate it also when the chairman came to the site. It's when you come out there and we problem solve together that we do better work for our community. So I've been very honored to be feeling more included this year. And
on a personal note, I would love to have you to Ahmed Battistini Rec Center. Wonderful facility, and we could use some of your creativity there.
Well, if we do,
so that's a date.
Well, if I do 4 of them well, I'm a little bit about let's get it perfect. And if I can do 4 well, we'll figure out a way to do more, because I'll be honest with you. I can't wait for the new superintendent to be as inclusive and invite me in. But he's got a lot on his plate right now. So I knew that they couldn't handle us pushing. He didn't need me pushing against him.
How do we fund you? How do we fund you? What is your funding sources?
I have a $2 million budget, and of that budget, I am very grateful to the city council and the mayor for the $350,000 that I get to help with some of my administrative costs, because I have 16 staff and I have 200 part-time workers, usually on average 30 public school teachers and 5 or 6 police officers, but mostly the nonprofit sector that you all know and love. The largest chunk of money, Leader Ryan, it comes from the federal government, 21st century funding that comes through the state. Doesn't come from the state, it comes from federal investment, and that's about 700,000. So a public, and then I get some money from the state for these advanced courses for credit. We offer 10 courses for credit through organizations like the Children's Museum, and we just brought on the Kappa Academy and Youth in Action and the Zoo. And they offer courses for high school credit, and we get funding, reimbursement only, performance-based for that. So it's a small amount of money. And then we do get an AmeriCorps grant. We can have up to 20 AmeriCorps. So, but I have to raise $1 million privately every year. So when I can actually retire someday and not try to twist the arms of all my friends to make donations and their corporations to me, I will be a much happier human being, because I feel like I wander around with a tin cup in every home that I go to. But I also am able to get a lot of national foundation grants and local foundation grants, very little bits of corporate, because we don't have a big corporate community. So our reputation is nationally acclaimed. I've provided technical assistance to over 40 cities around the country, everything from Worcester to New Bedford to Omaha to Tacoma, Washington, to say, hey, here's the elixir, here are all my documents and agreements, here are my measurements and assessment tools, and here's what I use for technical platforms. Take it all and do it in your city too. So
is there thank you very much for that answer. Is there a leveraged or a match requirement on those federal dollars that you receive?
No. And the good thing about the fact that I have private dollars that enhance that, I have to say it costs me about $250,000 per school, and I get about 120, and I have to raise the additional private money. But the beauty of that is that I can let a few other kids, like one of the things I'm going to do with the rec centers is if these are neighborhood based, I don't want to just have our targeted schools. So I did ask permission of RIDE since I have private dollars. If, for instance, there's a posse of kids that hangs out at Zucolo, and suddenly I got kids from every other place, but those kids go to Nathaniel Green and I don't service Nathaniel Green. I'm going to, like, with the private dollars, let a little posse. I'll cap the posses, but I got to make sure I'm neighborhood centric in doing this work now that I'm out in the rec centers. So I don't want to put the directors and the department in a tough place. So that's the beauty of the private dollars. It allows me some flexibility to be inclusive and to think neighborhood in a neighborhood way and not always limited to the federal requirements. Although the federal office, the office at the state at RIDE, Jan Merman, is the most progressive, broad-minded leader in the country for 21st century office. So we have a fabulous team at RIDE on this.
That's awesome. How many years have you gotten that 21st century funding? Is that a continual stream? Are you fearful of losing that, or is that?
No, actually, I'm pretty confident about it. It's a pretty bipartisan funding stream. It's great you asked that. And there's a huge group of us national organizations that advocate for that every year. And it's the National After School Alliance. We have a state alliance that's been a big advocate. Actually, I helped put Congressman Cicilline on the map with after school. He's considered one of the biggest advocates of after school in the country, as is Sheldon Whitehouse. So legislators all over the country turn to both Senator Whitehouse and Cicilline, and they form coalitions to protect that money, and they do it across the aisle. And we usually get 5-year contracts. So I think I'm at the end of like 2 more years of a 5-year contract. And this state allows for renewing the contract. Some states like Louisiana say you get 5 years and then you're out, which is craziness, because then, like, who's running it? And all those kids get dumped in a whole new group of kids. So that's really good that I have, like, it's just like a third of my funding is steady. Right. And then if I have that city bit to help, that city investment leverages other private dollars. So when I go, I just got a big Hearst grant, and when I go to the Nellie Mae and the Rhode Island Foundation, they are very pleased to see that the city has skin in the game. So it's a huge.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Vice Chair. Councilwoman Anthony?
Well, all sorts of accolades for Hillary, so I'll just pile right on. I'll just say that I've been a big fan of PASA. I briefly taught a program at PASA when I was first moved here. Yep. And I have been incredibly impressed with the quality of the programs and the work Hillary's done. But I think that what really stands out to me this year is how Hillary has been able to pivot to continue providing the quality programming during the summer and after school and everything else she's doing, to pivot during the COVID crisis, to make sure that she was still there. She figured out how to problem solve it. She figured out how to continue offering the programs. She's innovative. She's a problem solver. And I mean, this is a critical time because, our online learning, the kids are at home, and Hillary is just opened the world up to them. And she's been able to really continue offering her programming during this time. I've been incredibly impressed and very, very grateful and thankful. So, I also would like to say that I'm most appreciative of your comments concerning the wonderful work our police department does. It's true that we have had a number of hearings on the defunding of the police department, and I think it's our job as city council and members of the finance committee particularly to listen to that testimony, but we haven't heard enough about the good work our police department does, because I consider especially Chief Clements to be an outstanding leader, and I just really appreciate your testimony.
Thank you. And I have to say, I think we have a department that would sit at the table with Providence Center and Family Services at PASA and the Institute for Nonviolence and other leaders, and the city council and the mayor, and craft a future plan I know my son did not sign up to do Narcan and drug counseling. He did not sign up to really deal with the mental health crisis that we have in our society. So if we aren't thinking collectively of getting poverty and the lack of resources off the backs of the police officers so they can really do crime fighting, we do a disservice to the department. And I think we collectively as a community, if we plan this year and bring all these great organizations together who have insight on the complexities of their work, that we could really actually come up with the kinds of models that I know you've been looking at. I think we have potential to do that and lead the country with this police department and this city council and the mayor and our outstanding nonprofit community organizations.
Thank you. President Matos, then Councilman Taylor. President Matos, you have the mic.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chairman Iglesias, and thank you, Hillary. I think you know that I'm a big fan of the work that you do. I appreciate everything that you've been doing. And during our conversations, one of the things that you talked about was about how you've been going to other cities across the country to present the model and to show the work that you're doing. And you mentioned a little bit about that earlier, but I think I would like for my colleagues in the City Council to understand to the all the knowledge that you have from the work that you do here and how it's being appreciated outside in other cities. So can you talk a little bit more about the work that you're doing with other cities?
Well, I mean, two cities that have copied our model almost whole cloth is Nashville, and Nashville has the Nashville After Zone. And it turns out one of my best friends in college is now the mayor, and he was the city council finance chair and helped get them financed because they liked the model so much. Hey, it's a great guy. If you go to Nashville, I'll set you up, because they love Providence because they copied our model. And the other city that we have a really close relationship with is Richmond, Virginia. And I know the Richmond, Virginia mayor has a really good, I think he was going to do a South by Southwest presentation with our mayor. They have a good relationship. And in fact, when COVID hit, we were really impressed with the technology system that Richmond was doing. I send my staff down to learn from other cities. So the Southwest gives me airline tickets for free as a donation. And 2 years ago, I sent my whole team to Nashville to exchange ideas as a professional development exercise to see what Nashville's doing, that they changed and improved our model. And then we exchanged and it was fabulous. And then this last year, I sent my staff to Richmond because it's just, we learn so much. When COVID hit, I saw them in a national presentation. They were talking about a technology system called Edmodo, which is like Google Classroom. And they had worked it. It was doing great. So we piloted it this summer. When the superintendent came on my first board meeting, I said, we're not going to use Google Classroom because I don't want to have to try to get permission to get the names and all the things from the school department. It takes too long. Sorry very much. I'd rather have my own system that can talk to your system. And I mentioned Edmodo, and he said, oh, that's a fabulous system. So we piloted that summer because we learned it from Richmond. And it comes to diversity. When Minneapolis hit, my best friend and colleague, Liberian woman, Wookie Rhea, I called her that night after seeing the news, and we were both in tears together. And she has done a huge amount of work around race and equity. And I am turning to her and her team to help guide, and I may even hire a Minneapolis consultant to help us think through our equity issues. So it's not one way. It's really a two-way collegial multi-city. There are 23 cities. I'm on the executive committee of a group called Everywhere Counts. But I learn as much as I share from those cities, and I think it's invaluable. So anytime any of you are traveling to cities and you want to know in the after-school community how much Providence is loved, you need to send me a note, and I'll make sure that you are well received.
Thank you. Next, Councilman Taylor.
Sure, Hillary. I just wanted to jump in real quick because I was there actually in the beginning when PASA kicked off as being president of Elmwood Little League. And I know how much that PASA, Good Sports, she introduced me to Good Sports, and how much they helped out. At the time was the largest little league with 800 kids in it. And between PASA and Good Sports brought a lot of smiles to those 800 kids at all different ages. So
yeah, you got new lights.
New lights out of that. Yep, that was the big thing. And so I was there in the beginning, and I know how hard she works, and I just want to say thank you for continuing your hard work.
Thank you, Jim. That was a treat. I was so thrilled when those lights got switched on. I think those yellow bumpers over at you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep, Madam President?
thank you. I just want to say, Hillary said about the work that happened at the Buckland Park and at the rec center, and I just want to acknowledge that Councilman Taylor has been a driving force to make sure that that happens.
Thank you, Councilman. Whoa, that blew my mind when I drove out there Monday.
On the 22nd of September, we're having the ribbon cutting for the new basketball painting and everything. So if you're available, welcome aboard, Hillary, if you're available that day.
Great, because my meeting tomorrow with Jilly Payne in the city is to get the hoops up, because I want to be able to do basketball with Frank Luca. Yahoo!
All right. Any more comments or questions by committee members?
How refreshing this was. That's my comment.
Yes. All right.
It's a beautiful thing when it all comes together and it works the way it should be. And all it takes is someone as punching
and as you say, both you and the chairman, we need to celebrate the positive in these tough times, but it doesn't mean we don't stop the work, because there's a ton to do. Our kids and our families are suffering here. So
well said, Hillary. And if you can bottle your exuberance, I think you'll solve your financial problems.
Personally, not so good, but you know.
I think you will. You bottle that, and thank you, by the way. I think it is. I agree with Vice Chair. It's important that we do celebrate the positive stuff. We acknowledge the problems we have. We address them together as a team and as a community, but we don't ignore the good stuff that's happening too, just so we can prove sometimes a political point, and then we ignore all the positive stuff. So I want to thank you. I think this was for me, it was a very good meeting, and I appreciate you participating. And we'll be inviting you again, and we're going to be inviting some more of you other folks that work with the Providence Police Department to talk about some of the further good works that they're doing together with the community and with these nonprofits such as yourself. Any other comments or questions by committee members?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right, well, thank you. And then I'm going to ask for a motion to, I guess, continue on item number 24. The motion continue on item number 24.
So moved. So moved.
Second. Councilwoman Castillo, seconds it. Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
A motion, Madam Clerk, item number 25.
Communication from Gina M. Costa, internal auditor, dated August 27, 2020, submitting the general reporting fees and the required 10% dedication to document preservation and technology upgrades.
Okay, so can we have a motion at this time to, I guess, continue this matter?
Motion to continue item 25.
Second.
By Councilwoman Castillo and Councilman Taylor. Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. With that, there's no more further business.
Motion adjourned.
Motion to adjourn by
Second.
Second, Councilman Taylor, Councilman